Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Gentleman Pursuits podcast. And good day to you, Chelsea, if you're listening right now. How's your morning been? Hope you have a lovely day today. And how's everyone else doing? Warm and happy? Uneventful? Well, actually, for the whole watch community, it has been quite an explosive week. First, we got the Antique Roadshow, where in North Carolina, I forgot. But a veteran discovered that a watch he bought many years ago, which he had barely worn, was the Paul Newman 6263 Daytona, market value at around 500,000 to 700,000 because of the unique oyster imprint on the dial. Quite an uplifting news actually, because the watch was perfectly preserved and all the original documents and even the boxes with the watch. He looked really happy and almost fainted when he heard that a watch he bought for around $400 back in the days is now worth over $500,000. Quite a funny story. Definitely go check it out if you haven't not already. The second event that happened recently, however, isn't that uplifting at all. It is a scandal revolving around the horology house, where a customer claimed that the horology house sold a counterfeit to them for $29,000. Horology house later on made an Instagram post apologizing for letting such thing to happen, and the customer has received a full refund immediately. Well, in lieu of recent events where everything seemed to be Rolex related, why don't we spend this episode talking about Rolex a little bit? I'm not talking about the legacy or the history behind the glorious Rolex brand name. In this episode, I want to talk about, discuss why the Rolex Submariner is such a popular watch. Often when people talk about Rolex, the first image that pops into my head is always a Submariner, a black Submariner. Then it's the Daytona. Also the most counterfeited watch in the world. You may have guessed it already. It is a Rolex Submariner. So that got me thinking, I bet a person can know nothing about horology. That person can't even distinguish between an AP and the Big Ben, right? That same person can still confidently recognize when someone is wearing a Rolex Submariner. Why? So when the Rolex Submariner was first introduced in the Basel watch fair in 1954, the price of the watch was marked at $150. $150 for a Rolex watch is something that no one would ever dare to even think about, but it happened back in the days. So from that point on, the watch has propelled itself to be one of the most iconic timepieces of all time. And of course, comparing the 6205 and 6204, which are the original Submariners, to the modern Submariners, there are a fair share of differences, such as the crown guards, the ceramic bezel, etc. But in a holistic point of view, it pretty much stayed the same. So what exactly are the reasons behind the fame and of such a widely recognizable timepiece? One of the major factors is none other than James Bond himself. The Submariner is sometimes referred to as the James Bond watch, which is the 6358 version of the Submariner, appeared in the first movie played by Sean Connery, and also in the Live or Let Die. And the Man with the Golden Gun movie, a 5513, can be seen on Roger Moore's wrist. It's always nice to have something marketed by a famous character, am I right? So as the popularity of the James Bond series grew, more and more people started to pay attention to the movie details, such as the effects, the stunts, the stuntmans, and props, which ultimately includes what kind of watches each actor is wearing, thus beginning the rise of the Submariner's fame. The second reason that I can think of that Submariner may have made Submariner into such an international sensation is the versatility of the watch. There are a lot of watches that are considered versatile, but in a sense, which can be worn on different occasions, while you're doing sports, going to cocktail parties, or even the most formal white tie events. However, I don't think there's such a watch like a Submariner. As the name suggests, Submariner was built for diving. It's a diving watch. It is also a watch used by a French company for various diving operations and engineering projects. So if you Google Comex Rolex, Comex Rolex, you will see a bunch of Submariners with the word Comex on a dial. It's actually pretty cool. But the thing is, even though the watch itself was built for diving, over time it has slowly evolved itself to become a watch seen in offices and even with black tie and even on James Bond's wrist while he's on a mission, right? So for most people, when they spend a fortune to buy a watch, it makes sense to want the most out of it. And it is normal to want to buy a watch that can be worn to different occasions, right? So, and the help of the psychology behind the name Rolex, the Submariner slowly became the number one most wanted watch in the world. Third reason being the watch itself is sturdy as hell. Made with 904L steel, while most watches are made with 316L steel, allowing the watch to be more resistant to corrosion, as 904 are usually only seen in the aerospace or chemical engineering sector. The watch also has a 300-meter diving resistance, and the parachrom hairspring within the watch, which is a Rolex invented technology, it enabled the watch to be more resistant to shocks and temperature fluctuation. A watch that hardy and tough, it doesn't matter if you dive or not, because in an everyday situation, there are gonna be a few moments where your clumsiness comes into play, where you bump your wrist onto your desk, your chair, a pillar, whatever. Right? So a sturdy watch always comes in handy. One last thing, that this is not a reason why it is popular, but more like a proof on why it is popular. It is that a lot of brands such as Breitling or Blancpain, a lot of their diving watches were inspired by Submariner. So, how iconic do you think it is? Hey guys, thank you so much for listening to the latest episode of the podcast. Make sure you hit that subscribe or follow button in front of you. I'm not sure if you're listening this on Spotify or Anchor, but either way, make sure you're following me on every social media platform, on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Anchor, Spotify, everything. Just make sure you're following me. You'll get the latest news on articles, uploads, podcasts, new news, all kind of posts on watches and whiskeys. If you're not, you're missing out. So yeah, make sure you're following us. And until next Sunday, have a great week, guys. Stay safe. I'll see you guys.